Welcome to this month's episode of RTO Insights, brought to you by the Association of Progressive Rental Organization, the nation's rent-to-own trade association, and sponsored by Rent Direct, a division of Nationwide, the country's largest retail buying group. My name is Ed Wynn III. I am the General Counsel for APRO. I want to talk to you briefly today about the history of rent-to-own. Some of you new to the business may not know how far back the rental concept goes, and even some of you old-timers may not know that it far predates the Talley brothers and their Mr. T's store back in Wichita in the 60s. The concept originated in the British Commonwealth and the countries that made up that Commonwealth: Great Britain, Australia, Canada, India, and others. Early in the 20th century, the rent-to-rent concept took hold in Great Britain with the development of first radios, then black and white TVs, then color TVs. And in fact, 70 to 80% of consumers in Great Britain rented their first radios and then their televisions. In the early 20th century, rent-to-own had its birth in the United States with Singer sewing machines, and that was the means by which they were marketing sewing machines, with the rent-to-own concept very similar to the rent-to-own concept we know today. There are still rent-to-rent companies alive and well and doing big business in Great Britain. Radio Rentals is one, Granada, and others. In the U.S., rent-to-rent had a place in the telephone business. Everybody in the United States rented their black rotary telephones until Ma Bell got busted up back in the 60s. So rent-to-own existed as a marketing concept and as a transaction in the United States in the early 20th century, but it got reborn and really rejuvenated with the Talley brothers out of their Mr. T's store in Wichita in the 1960s. It had a growth spurt in the 70s as several of the Mr. Talley's employees went out on their own and developed their own rent-to-own concepts. Great Britain brought the rent-to-rent concept to the United States in competition with rent-to-own back in the 70s, and Radio Rentals had 30,000 color televisions out on rent in New York City for a while, but ultimately the rent-to-own concept prevailed and rent-to-rent electronics died out. There were, in 1980, maybe 400 rent-to-own stores in total in the United States. By 1995, there were over 8,000 rent-to-own stores. So the growth from 1980 to the mid-90s was phenomenal in the industry. While rent-to-own enjoyed enormous success and growth during those years in the United States, the concept got retransported back to Great Britain as true rent-to-own with stores like Bright House and Perfect Home, and it's enjoying modest success in that country today. Rent-to-own in this century has continued to grow and evolve through primarily the kiosk concept and rent-to-own on the internet. In the kiosk setting, rent-to-own may be the second or the third or even the fourth tier of alternate means of acquiring merchandise through a retail merchant. The customers may be asked if they want to pay cash or credit for the items they desire. If that doesn't work, then they might be run through credit for bank financing, and if that doesn't work, they might be offered a rent-to-own option. On the internet model, rent-to-own dealers are offering their products through their websites and then are delivering products nationwide through delivery companies like UPS. In the next episode of RTO Insights, we're going to look at the legal evolution of the rent-to-own industry in America. Until then, I invite you to check out the Trade Association's website, rtohq.org, rent-to-own headquarters, and until then, treat your customers like royalty. They deserve it. I'm Ed Wynn III.